Hey, what's going on? This is Seth from retipster.com. And in this video, I'm just going to really quick show you a couple tricks you can use if you're in the market for an Airbnb rental and you're not sure what parts of town or what neighborhoods have the highest occupancy rate. So like what areas should you be buying in if you want to make sure that that property is occupied as frequently and as often as possible throughout the entire year. Because a lot of times, if you just sort of buy where you think it's going to be good, you're sort of just going on your gut. But if you have some actual data to use and you can get some like real-time information on other properties and how their numbers look, that can be infinitely more helpful than just buying a property based on what you think is going to perform well. So the tool that I'm using here is a system called Mashvisor, and there's other websites that do similar stuff to this, but this is the one I'm most familiar with, so I'm just going to show you how this one works. All you got to do is go ahead and type in whatever city you're looking at. So for example, I'm going to type in my city, Grand Rapids, Michigan, just as an example, and then it brings us to a search page that looks like this. And first thing you want to do if you're just looking for a high-level overview on what areas of your town have the best numbers for what you're looking for. So for example, the best occupancy rate for Airbnb properties specifically. You can go ahead and click on this thing and explore the data. And there's a number of different heat maps that you can view with this system. So for example, Airbnb occupancy rate. Let's click on this one. And what it's going to show us here is, as you can see, a heat map. And if you observe this little key or legend down here, it shows us that all the areas that are red have the lowest or the worst occupancy rate, and the areas that are green have the best occupancy rate. So just from this, we can see there's sort of like different pockets of town that do pretty well, specifically when it comes to that single measurement of the occupancy rate. So this doesn't tell us like the cash on cash return or how much income each property is producing, none of that stuff. It's only occupancy rate. So if that's what we care the most about, we can go ahead and zoom into this and start exploring things a little bit further. As we can see here, this part of town, there's a bunch of different properties we can click on. If we click on this thing right here that says 23, it will bring us in and we can see all those properties individually. And when we just hover over these, it will show us right off the bat what like the cap rate is and the cash on cash return for the purpose of Airbnb rentals. And it also shows us what those numbers are for traditional rentals. And there's actually like several different data sources that this information is pulled from. And I'm not going to tell you that it's like guaranteed to be accurate, but in my own experience of using this site, it's surprisingly accurate. I think it's definitely worth your while to verify all the numbers before you actually make a purchasing decision. But for the most part, it does a pretty good job of pulling in some fairly reliable numbers. So anyway, this is basically just telling us that this part of town has a pretty high occupancy rate. So if we click on any one of these properties here, it will open up a new window and we can look closer at some of the numbers. And right here for occupancy rate, it's telling us that this particular property is occupied 62% of the time. Or you can convert this to days of the year and you can see that it's occupied 226 days of the year. So pretty helpful to know. And obviously, if you want to go back and look at any of these other properties, you can see all the exact same information. And like this one, for example, is occupied 76% of the year. And this one over here, this one is also occupied 62% of the year. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what the numbers look like for a few of the properties in this pocket of town that does particularly well in terms of the occupancy rate. So that's good to know. Now let's say you want to look at something like the rental income from Airbnb properties. Well, they've got a heat map for that as well. And if you click on that heat map, it will give you some different information and you can zoom in here. And as you can see, the areas that are green, those are neighborhoods that produce higher income for those Airbnb properties. And the areas that are red have lower income. And just based on like any one of these maps, I don't think that's enough to make a conclusive decision because there's a lot of other things you have to look at and consider as well. But when you consider the income, the occupancy rate, the Airbnb cash on cash return, which is another heat map that you can take a look at, and then obviously opening up each property and looking closer at it, to make sure that all of the numbers and inputs actually make sense. It's a pretty helpful tool that can just very quickly point you to the areas of town that are most ideal for this particular type of real estate investment. Instead of spending like hours and hours and hours searching all over the place, analyzing hundreds of properties, all just to find out that most of them are not a good idea, MashVisor does a really good job of just like cutting out a lot of that wasted time and eliminating a lot of those junk properties and just drawing your attention to the ones that are most likely going to be a better investment for this particular use or whatever use you have in mind. If you look at these heat maps closer, you can also do this exact same thing for traditional rental properties. Say if you're not looking at Airbnbs, but you just want to buy like a long-term rental to lease out to a tenant for 12 months at a time, that kind of thing. It can do all the same stuff for a traditional rental property if that's what you're interested in. So anyway, I just thought these heat maps were kind of a genius idea, whoever thought this up, just because it makes it really, really easy to focus on the things that matter and are better investments and kind of ignore the stuff that you shouldn't be wasting your time on anyway. So if that looks helpful to you, I'm going to have an affiliate link to MashVisor beneath this video. It's retipster.com/MashVisor. Pretty simple. And you can actually get a 25% discount on your first payment through them if you go through that link. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. I thought it was pretty helpful. Thought it was pretty cool. And if you're in the market for either a traditional rental or an Airbnb, whatever market you're looking at, this could be something that could save you a ton of time and make your life a lot easier. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching. Best of luck.